As I've said time and time again through interruption, they're there to protect law enforcement,
Do they have
ICE
the ability
officers
to arrest?
who are trying to do their job,
Okay.
deporting illegals who were allowed in by the previous
So
administration.
they cannot arrest and detain citizens of the United States, the uniformed military.
As
is
we've
that right?
stated, if necessary, in their own self-defense, they could temporarily
Okay.
detain and
Have
hand
you-
over to ICE. But
have
there's
you
no
given-
arresting going
have
on.
you-
And you know this better
Have
than
you
you're trying to
authorized
play
the
political
U.S.
games.
military
There's
to
no
use
arresting
cyber
of U.S.
tools
personnel.
of the U.S. military against members of the protest? Have you authorized U.S. military cyber tools to investigate people participating in these protests? Yes or no?
Certainly in no way that I'd be aware of.
Okay, that's
Senator,
good.
I'd be careful what you read in books and believing it, except for the Bible.
Hello, Patriots. This is Conservative Call. And if you believe in defending our Constitution and keeping our military apolitical like I do, smash that like button right now and subscribe for more content that the mainstream media won't show you. Hit that notification bell, because today we're diving into something that should terrify every freedom-loving American.
Senator Slotkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I said in your hearing, when you had your confirmation hearing, that my biggest concern with you at the helm was the potential use of the military in ways that contradict the Constitution or that taint what I hope we all want, which is an apolitical military. And when I asked you about whether you would accept an order that was actually given to your predecessor, Secretary Esper, Trump's SecDef, to deploy active duty troops against unarmed protesters and to, in Secretary Esper's words, shoot at them, shoot at their legs, you said this was all theoretical. Here we are, a few months later, you've deployed 4,700 troops to Los Angeles and against the wishes of the governor. And my colleague across the aisle was right. It is the first time since 1965 that we have deployed Guard troops without the permission of the governor. In all the instances he laid out, the president had sent in the military to protect protesters, not against the protesters. So you may dismiss it, but I feel like this is a fundamental issue of American democracy. If you love your country and you want an apolitical military, then it should be the last resort, not the first resort in our country to use them. So to get to the non-theoretical, have you authorized the uniformed military to detain or arrest protesters in Los Angeles?
Senator, I would just start by saying you're not a protester if you're throwing concrete
100%.
at law
Arrest those
enforcement
people.
officers.
Throw them in the jail. 100%. But what you're doing is something different. Everyone knows this is a political decision, right? So we don't trust that you're using the best interests of the military, certainly, and of democracy on top of that. So have you given the order? That's all I want to know. It's not theoretical. For the U.S. military, not law enforcement. They can arrest all day long. That's the job. Do they have the ability, the uniformed military, to arrest and detain protesters currently today? It's a yes or no thing, authority.
It's sort of amusing the extent to which the speculation is out there. These troops are given very clear orders.
Then what is the order? Then list it out for us. Be a man, list it out. Did you authorize them to detain or arrest? That is a fundamental issue of democracy. I'm not trying to be a snot here. I'm just trying to get the actual, did you authorize them to do that?
All of these orders and what they're sent there to do are public. They are there
so
to...
say it. So say it. Yes or no?
I'd like to.
Please, yes or no?
As I've said time and time again through interruption, they're there to protect law enforcement,
Do they have
ICE
the ability
officers
to arrest?
who are trying to do their job,
Okay.
deporting illegals who were allowed in by the previous
So
administration.
they cannot arrest and detain citizens of the United States, the uniformed military.
As
is
we've
that right?
stated, if necessary, in their own self-defense, they could temporarily detain and hand over to ICE. But there's no arresting going on. And you know this better than you're trying to play political games. There's no arresting of U.S. personnel.
Of the U.S. military against members of the protest. Have you authorized U.S. military cyber tools to investigate people participating in these protests? Yes or no?
Certainly in no way that I'd be aware of.
Okay, that's good. I love that answer. That's great. Have you given the order to be able to shoot at unarmed protesters in any way? I'm just asking the question. Don't laugh. Like the whole country. And by the way, my colleagues across the aisle.
What is that based on? What evidence would you have that an order like that has ever been given?
It is based on Donald Trump giving that order to your predecessor, to a Republican Secretary of Defense, who I give a lot of credit to because he didn't accept the order. He had more guts and balls than you because he said, I'm not going to send in the uniformed military to do something that I know in my gut isn't right. He was asked to shoot at their legs. He wrote that in his book. That's not hearsay. So your poo-pooing of this, it just shows you don't understand who we are as a country, who we are. And all of my colleagues across the aisle, especially the ones that served, should want an apolitical military and not want citizens to be scared of their own military. I love the military. I served alongside my whole life, so I'm worried about you tainting it. Have you given the order? Have you given the order that they can use lethal force against honor? I want the answer to be no. Please tell me it's no. Have you given the order?
Senator, I'd be careful what you read in books and believing it, except for the Bible.
Oh my God. So your former predecessor, I guess that's not enough for you. Okay, on Iran. I don't think there's a debate. There's like a cat fight going on in your own party about whether to go after Iran. Have you commissioned any day after planning? So any force protection, any use of ground troops in Iran, any cost assessments? Because I don't think we doubt what we can do as a country in the attack. It's the day after with Iraq and Afghanistan that so many of us have learned to be so deeply concerned about. Have you authorized day after planning?
As I've said, we have plans for everything, Senator.
Okay.
And I would also reiterate how we began that there will be a classified portion of this 15 minutes after we adjourn.
I just watched this heated exchange between Senator Slotkin and our defense secretary. And folks, this is exactly why we need strong conservative leadership. Let me break down what's really happening here because the left-wing media is spinning this completely backwards. First, let's talk about what Senator Slotkin is actually complaining about. She's upset that President Trump deployed 4,700 troops to Los Angeles to help with deportations. She calls this unconstitutional, but here's what she's not telling you. These aren't protesters being targeted. These are illegal immigrants who should have been deported years ago under proper immigration enforcement. The senator keeps trying to paint this as military action against American citizens. But listen carefully to what the defense secretary actually says. He makes it crystal clear that we're talking about people throwing concrete at law enforcement and people who entered our country illegally. Those aren't peaceful protesters. Those are criminals and foreign nationals who have no right to be here in the first place. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Slotkin keeps referencing the supposed order that was given to former Defense Secretary Esper about shooting protesters in the legs. She's treating this like it's established fact, but notice how our current Defense Secretary responds. He tells her to be careful what she reads in books, except for the Bible. That's a man who understands that political memoirs are often written to settle scores and make money, not to tell the whole truth. Let me explain what's really happening here from a constitutional perspective. The Insurrection Act gives the president clear authority to deploy federal troops when local authorities can't or won't maintain order. Los Angeles has been a sanctuary city that has actively obstructed federal immigration law for years. When local officials refuse to enforce federal law, the president has not just the right, but the duty to step in. The defense secretary makes this point perfectly when he says these troops are there to protect law enforcement doing their job of deporting illegals who were allowed in by the previous administration. That's not militarizing domestic policy. That's enforcing a law that Congress passed and previous administrations ignored. Here's what really bothers me about Senator Slotkin's line of questioning. She keeps demanding yes or no answers to complex legal and operational questions, then gets frustrated when she doesn't get the soundbite she wants for her political theater. This is an oversight. This is grandstanding designed to create viral moments that make our military leaders look bad. When she asks about cyber tools being used to investigate protesters, and the secretary says he's not aware of any such authorization, she acts like that's some kind of gotcha moment. But that's exactly the answer you want from a defense secretary who respects civil liberties and follows proper protocols. The senator also reveals her true priorities when she complains about troops being deployed without the governor's permission. Since when do governors get to veto federal immigration enforcement? California's governor has been actively obstructing federal law for years. The president doesn't need permission from state officials to enforce federal statutes, especially when those same officials are part of the problem. Let's talk about what this really represents. This is the deep state and Democratic establishment trying to tie the hands of the president who actually wants to enforce our immigration laws. They're using terms like constitutional crisis and militarization to scare people away from supporting effective border enforcement. The defense secretary handles this exactly right. He doesn't get drawn into political games or hypothetical scenarios. He sticks to the facts. Military personnel are there in a support role. They can detain people temporarily for self-defense and hand them over to ICE, but they're not conducting arrests of American citizens. That's exactly how it should work. When Slotkin asks about lethal force authorization, she's trying to create a viral moment where she can claim the administration is planning to shoot American protesters. But notice she never gets that answer, because it's not true. She's building a straw man argument based on unverified claims from a political memoir. Here's the bigger picture patriots need to understand. For 4 years under the previous administration, we had catch and release policies that allowed millions of illegal immigrants to flood into our communities. Local officials in places like Los Angeles actively obstructed federal enforcement. Now we have a president who's actually trying to fix the problem. And suddenly Democrats are concerned about constitutional overreach. The hypocrisy is staggering. These same people had no problem with federal agents being deployed during the 2020 riots to protect federal buildings. But now when we're using federal resources to enforce immigration law, suddenly it's a threat to democracy. This exchange also shows why we need strong conservative leadership in Congress. Senator Slotkin is more interested in creating political theater than actually understanding the legal framework that governs military deployment. She's treating a serious policy discussion like a cable news debate. The defense secretary's comment about being careful what you read in books, except for the Bible, was brilliant. He's pointing out that political memoirs are often unreliable sources written by people with axes to grind. The Bible, on the other hand, represents eternal truth and moral authority that doesn't change based on political convenience. What really concerns me is how this reflects the broader effort to weaponize our military against conservative priorities. The left spent years claiming they wanted to depoliticize the military, but what they really wanted was a military that would only be used for purposes they approve of. When we use federal resources to enforce immigration law, suddenly they're worried about constitutional overreach. This is why elections matter, patriots. We need leaders who understand that enforcing our laws isn't militarization, it's governance. We need officials who won't be intimidated by political theater and media pressure campaigns designed to prevent effective policy implementation. The fact that this is the first deployment without gubernatorial approval since 1965 isn't a bug, it's a feature. It shows how previous administrations, both Republican and Democrat, were too willing to let local officials obstruct federal law enforcement. Sometimes federal authority needs to be asserted, especially when dealing with issues that directly impact national security. If you agree that we need strong leadership that will enforce our immigration laws regardless of political pressure, hit that like button and share this video. Subscribe to Conservative Call for more analysis that cuts through the mainstream media spin and tells you what's really happening in Washington. The left wants you to believe that enforcing immigration law is somehow un-American or unconstitutional. Don't fall for it. What's really un-American is allowing millions of people to ignore our laws, while politicians like Senator Slotkin create political theater instead of supporting effective enforcement. Stay strong, stay informed, and keep fighting for the America our founders envisioned. Until next time, this is Conservative Call reminding you that the truth is worth defending.